Hello, I'm James Blore, and this is the very first episode of More Blore. Some of you may recognize me from my podcast, The Blorecast, which is a kind of weekly dose of British meets Slovak culture. It's available in both audio and video versions. But I wanted to do some more kind of video-related stuff, so I've created this adjacent series of YouTube videos called More Blore, which will allow me to explore stuff which might not come across on an audio-only podcast. The first few episodes will be subtitled Food Fight, and we'll be looking at lots and lots of different British and Slovak snacks, comparing them and deciding who has the better beverages and biscuits. Without further ado then, let's crack on with today's show, which is in fact about biscuits. In the future we'll be looking at crisps and hot drinks and cold drinks, but I have a lot of biscuits to show you. Some of them I brought back from the UK recently because we visited. I've lived here in Slovakia for a very long time, almost 27 years. But I do go back to the UK to visit quite often. So I have the opportunity to bring back, biscuits and crisps and lots of lovely tea in my suitcase. So I've got some stuff from there, and also I've been to the local potraviny or grocery shop to buy some representative and comparable samples of Slovak stuff, and in this case, Slovak biscuits. So we're going to look at this in a few different categories. We're going to start with basic biscuits, and then we're going to have a look at step-up biscuits, which are a bit better than basic, but not fancy chocolate or anything like that. Then we'll have a look at sandwich biscuits, which consist of 2 layers, obviously, and something in the middle. And finally, we'll have a look at kind of chocolate and more luxurious biscuits. Okay, first up then, we have the basic biscuits. And honestly, I couldn't find too many representatives for this in Britain. I think the classic one would be rich tea. And I actually have an open packet so I can show you what they look like. They're a little bit like, I think, Slovak Albert, if you remember those. They're quite thin, quite dry, a little bit sweet, but mostly tasteful. Not bad for dunking in your tea, but you do have to be careful that they don't break and fall in. Slovakia has quite a lot more basic biscuits, I would say. The very, very most basic, perhaps, would be, wow, Biscotti. Now, this is from Lidl, and I think the package is kind of designed to be retro, so please don't imagine that everything looks like this in Slovakia. It doesn't, but the biscuits certainly do. Okay, if you can see, they're basically little round things, and you might think that they're reasonably inoffensive and healthy, but I think they're actually full of sugar. But they're maybe quite good for, well, maybe they're good for kids. I'm not sure if they are, but they're pretty inoffensive. And if you've had a bit of a stomach upset, maybe you might have them on those occasions. We also have some sort of similar to rich tea. I think they're bebe, and there are various different kinds. And they're quite plain. I don't really have much to say about them. They are basic after all. The other basic Slovak biscuit I have to show you is Marina, which is a real traditional one. Not super interesting. When I was in hospital for an appendix operation, I couldn't eat very much at all for a week, and they slowly introduced different kinds of food, starting with, tea, and then soup with vegetables, and then mashed potato and stuff like that. And at the end of the week, they finally gave me something sweet. It was the first time I'd had something sweet, and it was Marina, and I loved it. But honestly, if it takes a week without any sweetness to make you enjoy something, it's probably not that good. However, there are a couple of interesting things about it. One, if I hold it close to the camera, you might be able to see that it contains fennel seeds, which is pretty cool. And the other interesting thing, I think, is that it has a darker cousin. They're called Indianky, and these are effectively the same biscuits. I suspect they don't have the fennel, no, but they're cocoa. And instead of being sort of, yellow, vanilla coloured, they're brown. And they've named them after Native Americans. So that would be the racist biscuit. Only in Slovakia. I don't think this could happen in the UK. Is it racist? Please write in the comments. Lots of comments, please, about whether Indianky are your favourite biscuit. Okay, let's move on to the next category, which is step up. So things which are a bit tastier than the basic stuff, but still don't have exciting chocolate or anything like that. In this category, so in the first category, I think Slovakia won hands down. You definitely have here more basic biscuits than are available in Britain. I think this category, when we step up a little bit, is where British biscuits begin to excel. It definitely contains some of my absolute favourites. I would suggest that the king of all biscuits, really, for me, would be ginger nuts, which are round, quite hard, and very strongly flavoured with ginger. And because they're quite hard, they're really good for dunking in your tea. So you can put them in your tea with little fear of them breaking and falling into the cup, and they are absolutely delicious. Even though they're just the step up, they are lovely. And another one in that category would be digestive biscuits. These are not the classic McVitie's ones, but you get the idea. They're a bit bigger. They're also round, difficult to describe the taste, and not readily available at all in Slovakia. If you see them, try them. They're really nice and, again, great for dunking. There's also stuff like shortbread, and we have here fruit shortcake. This packet's open because we've been eating it. There are loads of biscuits in this category in Britain. Not perhaps so many in Slovakia, but I would consider perhaps Esíčky to be the classic step up biscuits in Slovakia. I don't want to shade my face. Esíčky because they're shaped like the letter S. And you have paler ones and darker ones, but no mention of Indians this time. The paler ones are cinnamon flavoured, definitely my favourite, and the darker ones, predictably, are cocoa. Pretty good, and they're quite expensive, actually. They're almost €2 for this packet, shockingly. There's also stuff like Coca, I think, by the same manufacturer, or Pavia. So there definitely are some in this category, but I think Britain has more. Another thing that we have more of, I would say, is in category number 3, which is sandwich biscuits. Sandwich biscuits have 2, or I guess they could have more layers, but mainly 2 layers with something in between. So the classic Slovak one would be Romanka, which is 2 vanilla biscuits with some sort of chocolate pasty stuff in the middle. Quite nice, and probably would withstand dunking in your tea if you tried. I can't say that I've tried it, maybe after the video. And again, you might detect a theme here, but there is a sort of darker version, and these are called Princesky. And I believe that these are cocoa. Hang on, let me check. No, they're coffee flavoured. I stand corrected. So these are actually coffee flavoured. That's why they're darker. There you go. So one biscuit, another biscuit, something in the middle, and this is sort of coffee paste of some description. Another kind of sandwich biscuits which I didn't manage to buy in the local shop, but which are very popular in Slovakia, are discos and copies thereof. And those are basically round instead of oblong with rounded corners, but they're very much the same. They're sort of crappy biscuit with crappy filling, and I'm not a big fan of them, I have to say. But to each their own. In Britain, we have, in this category, the classics, I suppose, would be bourbons. Bourbons are 2, cocoa-flavoured biscuits with some chocolate cocoa filling in the middle, so not that different. I just like them a bit more, but maybe that's a personal thing. I couldn't say that they're objectively better, to be fair. But they're certainly classics. That's bourbon biscuits, and along similar lines, so here we have the dark and light British ones. We have custard creams, which are, I don't know if you can see that. Those are sort of vanilla biscuits with custard. There's not really custard in the middle, but with a vanilla flavoured filling. Custard is a sauce. It's called crème anglaise in French. I think it's made from eggs and vanilla and milk and sugar. And in Slovakia, it's a bit like pudding, but it's usually hot, and we have it with Christmas pudding, for example. But these are custard creams, so obviously it's not hot, and obviously it's not very liquid, but they have that sort of vanilla flavour. Not bad, not my favourites, but pretty good. Then we also have this sort of thing, circular biscuits with jam in the middle. The classics are Jammy Dodgers. Now, I only have this tiny packet of Jammy Dodgers, and these are smaller than normal. The normal ones are this size, and they're very nice. I like those. 2 sort of vanilla-y biscuits with jam stuff in the middle. I feel like Slovakia is missing a trick on some of those. We're really stuck with Romanky, Princesky, and disco imitations, which I'm not a big fan of. However, the next category, which is wafer biscuits, Slovakia runs all over, quite frankly. There's not that many of them in Britain. The real classic from my childhood is Blue Riband, which is just wafer chocolate, wafer chocolate, wafer chocolate, wafer chocolate, and covered in some kind of chocolatey covering, which isn't really chocolate. They're quite nice. I have fond memories of those. Haven't had them recently, though. Probably the best known one is Kit Kat, but I don't need to talk about that because that's available in both countries. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Another British one, and one of the few other wafer biscuits, I think, in Britain, is the classic Tunnock's caramel wafer, which has got caramel in it. The clue is in the name, sort of caramel wafer, and so on, and a sort of chocolatey outside. I used to love them, but honestly, I don't know if they've changed. Apparently the recipe hasn't changed, but I've gone off them a bit, I must say. But that's Tunnock's. Slovakia, meanwhile, has an almost infinite number of wafer biscuits. I don't even know where to start. Okay, we'll start with the absolute classic, Horalky. This is wafer and then some sort of peanutty filling, and the chocolate only goes around the edge, if I remember correctly. Pretty sweet, but to be honest, when I came to Slovakia, I couldn't understand it. These are very, very popular, and I didn't get it at all for many years. But I've actually grown to quite like them. I did sort of used to say that they were made from the sawdust and some sort of brown-coloured liquid on it. But that's just provocative and rude. I'm sorry. I apologise to everyone I ever said that to. They're pretty good. And if you haven't tried it, put one in the freezer and then eat it after an hour or so. It's an experience. Okay, so that's Horalka. That's an absolute classic. But there are so many more in this category. There's Netta, supposed to be mint flavoured. I can't taste the mint. I just don't get it. Also, Mila. I think the idea is that these are milk flavoured. You can see that they actually have a little bit of chocolatey stuff on top, I think. I hate them. I find them absolutely disgusting. But, to each their own. Kávenky, same sort of thing. I think without the chocolate surround, I don't eat these at all, but these will be coffee flavoured, but they don't have any chocolate on them. And then we have these. These are really good, okay? Opavia, what are they called? Zlate oplatki, and they have lots of different flavours, and these are the best ones in my opinion. Lemon flavour, no chocolate involved, very good indeed. There are also colonnadi, which I don't have here, which are, I think, hazelnut filling. Also no chocolate, really good they are. And then there's a bunch of cheaper stuff, which I'm not such a fan of. I think Tatranka, I feel like, is a bit of a copy of Horalka, named after mountains. And then we have some chocolate-covered cheap stuff. And we're going slightly into the next category here, chocolate biscuits. But these are wafer biscuits with chocolate on. Attack, pretty cheap and nasty, in my opinion. Sorry, Attack, if you are the... Indianky are classics, but also not my favourites, I must say. Again, these are small biscuits. This packet contains probably 6, I would think. So they're about this long. And they're wafers with some kind of chocolatey covering. And Fidorka, which is a round version of the same thing with a bit more chocolate on it, I would say. Also not my favourite. There are so many more. Really, like there's probably 2 or 3 times this number of other wafer biscuits. Slovaks are very, very big on wafer biscuits, I would say. Less big on, apart from the chocolate-covered wafer biscuits. Oh, wait, no, I've forgotten one. As a bit of a subcategory of wafer biscuits, because they're so very popular, we also have these kind of, I think you would call them trubečky. So little tubes made of expanded corn, if I'm not mistaken. There is a little picture of Sweet Corn Man on there. Expanded, extruded corn tubes filled with some sort of cocoa-y stuff, or you can get different flavours as well. The exciting thing about these, I'm not a big fan of them. But the exciting thing is that these are made by Alaska. There are other types available, I'm sure. But these are actually made in the village where I live. How exciting is that? And sometimes when you go outside, you can smell the aroma of, well, it's sort of like popcorn, I guess. Just give them a try. Give them a try if you haven't had Alaska. So that's wafers and tubes. The final category, in which I think Britain comes back into its own because we have a lot of them. I don't have too many representatives here, but chocolate-covered biscuits. There are tons of in Britain. Not so many in Slovakia, I would say. I'll start with the Slovak ones. The classic ones would be, let me get the name right. These are, polomachane. So I think half dipped, I think it's fair to say, which is like just a regular sort of biscuit, and one side is covered in chocolate, and you can get, these are plain ones, plain chocolate, well, chocolate. There's also milk chocolate as well. I'm quite a big fan of those. And this, I suppose, is the equivalent of British digestives, but chocolate digestives. So you get the same as these things, but one side absolutely is covered in chocolate. You can get milk chocolate, you can get plain chocolate. I think you can get white chocolate these days. You can also get them with caramel. Basically, everything from the other categories in Britain, you can also get covered with chocolate. And the other really classic one, I suppose, would be Choco Biscotti. I don't know how classic they are, but they've been here for quite a while. These are basically Jaffa cakes, as you can see, but they come in a range of different flavours, and these are raspberry, and in my humble opinion, are better than Jaffa cakes. Give them a try. But that's about it for, apart from the chocolate-covered wafers I've already mentioned, that's about it for chocolate-covered stuff in Slovakia. Britain has loads of other stuff. We have club biscuits, and there's, like 10 different flavours of club. Gold biscuits, which are sort of white caramelly chocolate covered. There's loads of them, but I'm not actually a very big fan of them, so we didn't bring that many back from the UK. One really classic one is penguins, the advert for which went, pick up a penguin. And these are basically bourbon biscuits, you may remember, sort of cocoa biscuit sandwich things, slightly different shape and covered in chocolate. They're all right. I'm not a big fan. What is interesting is that they have a joke on each packet, and the jokes are terrible, but it's a nice thought. Also, I wish I had to show you Viscount. Viscount are bloody lovely. They're sort of, they look like mini Jaffa cakes, but it's more biscuity than cakey, and it's mint. And they're fully chocolate covered. I don't have those with me, but check them out if you're ever in the UK. And the last thing I wanted to show you is the wagon wheel. A little hard to explain what it is, but I guess it's another sandwich biscuit of a sort. It's 2 layers of biscuit, and not honestly that good biscuit. And in the middle is this sort of sticky marshmallowy stuff, and the whole thing is covered in low quality chocolatey stuff. I'm not making it sound very nice. Honestly, it's not my favourite, but I used to love them as a child, and my daughter still loves them. But the one thing to mention is that, this thing with shrinkflation and everything costs the same price, but it's smaller than it used to be. Well, this is very much the case with wagon wheels. I mean, I know that I'm bigger than I used to be, and so things might seem smaller, but honestly, they used to be as big as my head, and now just, Excuse me, I'll wash that for my daughter later. Yeah. But the great thing about them, or at least when I was a kid, the great thing about them was that they very much reminded me of sort of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. They had that sort of vibe. So shout out to wagon wheels, certainly. And obviously they're supposed to look like the wheels of a wagon, if that wasn't clear. Okay, just to summarise then, I separated things into, I think, 4 categories, 4.5. We had basic biscuits. Slovakia was easily the winner there. Step up biscuits, I think British biscuits take that by an absolute mile. Wafer biscuits is practically Slovakia on its own. There are just so many of them. And these Trubičky also, that's a kind of a Slovak thing, I feel. And the last category of sort of fancy chocolate covered stuff, Britain has far more of those. On balance, I think I would have to give this, like, obviously I'm not entirely objective about this, and I did, I've spent more than half of my life in Slovakia, but it was the first half of my life that I spent in the UK, and that's obviously that's gonna weigh. I think that's gonna affect my judgment, but I have a lot of nostalgia connected to biscuits. But I would say, as objectively as I can, that there just is more variety in Britain. Wafer biscuits are all very well, but come on, Slovakia. Try harder. That said, Slovakia very much won the carbohydrate competition you may have seen. I think it was in episode number 3 of the Blorecast. And I would say that probably Slovakia took, although it's a lot tighter, the protein competition meets in the episode about pigs. I would say that Slovakia probably took that. So I'm going to call it 2-1 for Slovakia at the moment. And we'll see how this progresses. Next time, we will have a look at sweets and chocolate. And then we're going to have a look at hot drinks, coffee and tea mainly, and then cold drinks, which is more exciting than it sounds. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that's been interesting. Please let me know in the comments if you like this format and what your favourite biscuits are and how you feel about Indianky, for instance. Have a lovely evening. I've been James Blore. This has been More Blore, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.